This is the Straight Up Breakdown Podcast with Greg Smith and Jay Foreman.
Exclusively on the Hurrdat Media Network.
Tell it to me straight up.
Hello, and welcome into the Straight Up Breakdown Podcast, proudly part of the Hail Varsity Network. I am Greg Smith. You cannot wipe the smile off my face as long as this weather is around, friend.
I am Jay Foreman, your bootleg Tim the Tool guy, wannabe dad fix it all in a 2021 style.
Now listen, before we go any further, I got to hear about this. Because first of all, are you actually handy? Would you consider yourself to be handy?
I am when I have to be. And you know what I do is I fight it too much. And I had the idea that it was such a nice weekend with good weather up in the 70s. And I was going to go out there and I decided I was going to try to stain the fence by hand. And it was good weather on Saturday, windy on Sunday. But that's a lot of work, man. I think either that or I'm just that much out of shape. So I just I'll lean towards that. So I pivoted from that project. And then I did finish a couple things and build some shelves in the garage. So I'm handy when I need to be, but maybe I'm just not as smart as I used to be or should be when it comes to picking the right time to finish in some projects that are a little bit more out of my realm as far as the time and the effort to stain a fence.
So I'm sure there are plenty of husbands out there and probably wives out there can attest to this. A lot of us like to start these projects and then never finish them. I can think of a few of them up top of my head that are in here. If my wife came down here, she would list them out for you. Are you one of those two, or you start those bad boys? So did the fence get finished, or did you pivot before it was done?
No, we finished it. I finished it, but I had limped to the finish line. But usually I'll start a project and not finish, and there's probably numerous lights that need to be replaced around the house, et cetera, et cetera. But I get to them in due time, and I tried to see it was such a nice day. I was like, oh, I'm going to get started early this year, and then reality set in. I remembered how much of hard work is on your shoulder and when you're out of shape and stuff like that to stain a fence by hand. I need to invest into a sprayer, a spray gun, but I decided to do it myself, and I finished it, but I learned my lesson. And they always say a hard head makes for a soft butt. So, my butt's pretty soft today.
Yeah, I mean, listen, sometimes you got to learn those lessons the hard way, but I definitely give you props for diving into that. Before we go any further, though, I also have to give some props. We got to shout out International Women's Day because that is today when we are recording this, Monday, March 8th. And specifically, I wanted to shout out because as I was thinking about this, kind of the Husker women's sports who have really been holding it down for Nebraska. You think about it, obviously, volleyball, women's gymnastics, softball, basketball, women's gymnastics, bowling, winning national championships. So, the female Huskers out there definitely been holding it down and living up to their end of the bargain, especially in the Big Ten since they joined that.
Yeah, they've been pretty consistent, and they've been kind of our bell cow. And so, the women's volleyball team has obviously been outstanding, both, obviously winning, and then obviously, they just had a really good recruiting class. And then, the women's basketball team are really, and I like watching them.
Yeah.
Coached by Coach Amy Williams. They exceeded expectations this year. And so they're really good. I think gymnastics has always been good at Nebraska. Track has always been good at Nebraska. Softball, considering some of the stuff that they went through, in a really short time off the field. Then you had COVID. They came out the gate. So, you got to give it up to the women's sports. They both definitely are showing out and showing up, and that's always good for any university, but in particular Nebraska.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because I feel like Nebraska, youth women's sports, girls sports, are also it's very important right here. You're talking to people especially the high school level with volleyball and softball, but even the little kids, that stuff. It kind of you see how Nebraska has become very good at women's sports because it really starts at a young age, and it's pretty cool to see around here.
Yeah, it is, and it's really taken off, and it's also to the national level. I think when you look at Nebraska's volleyball recruiting class, they're getting kids right here at Nebraska, and keeping them in state, but they're nationally ranked. And then you look at the basketball, they just finished up the high school championships, and when you think of the Markowski girls, and in particular one that's going to come to Nebraska next year, they've been out doing that and traveling it through the AAU circuits and the club team circuits, which Markowski helped, I think, Andy Markowski, who's a former Husker, helped build girls youth program, the Lasers, and they're really good. And there's other ones throughout Lincoln, and Omaha. And so you saw a lot of talent in the high school level over the last couple of years, not only, in basketball and volleyball. Those are two big ones. Even from Lincoln East, you got, Briley Hill, who's right there in Lincoln East. She's going to University of Nebraska on a scholarship. So that's even big, when you think about local. And then I saw there was a girl that was from Nebraska that's won Defensive Player of the Year out there at the University of Wyoming. So they're spreading out and spreading all over the place, and it's really, really good. And I think it's something that's been building up for a long time. And anytime that you can get national exposure, whether it's male or female, but in particular females, it's good for the whole state. So you got to give kudos not only to the college teams, it's also the coaches that coach the youth, take them out and expand their horizons. And I think it's just one of those things when they got a little taste of being outside and competing against other kids, they brought it back here, and it's actually elevated the whole landscape of high school sports at the high school level as far as the females goes. And so that's a really, really good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, each week we start off, we have a couple of segments, and we start off with our first one called Coach Speak, where we go over something that a coach, player, or a talking head said, and then we'll give you the straight up breakdown about what they meant.
Coach Speak to Real Talk.
Now, this week comes courtesy of my main man, LeBron James, who had this to say after Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons were kind of ruled out of the All-Star game that happened over the weekend. Quote, "Well, I think it's very unfortunate that Joel and Ben won't be able to play in our game tonight," James said hours before the game after hearing about the situation. "Obviously, they are two worthy All-Stars, and this means a lot to all of us, even no matter how you feel about having to be here." End quote. So, Jay, what did LeBron mean by that statement?
Well, I mean, he's just what he said. They're good players, but obviously, there's a lot of guys that didn't want to be at the All-Star game. They felt like they're tired, or obviously, they should be tired with the way the season went. Obviously, they felt like the NBA, the big wigs, promised them there wouldn't be an All-Star weekend, and then magically there was. Obviously, it's a moneymaker. Things have opened up a little bit. So LeBron was getting it, on both ends. Maybe it's questionable how they got exposed to COVID, whether those two really wanted to be there.
Yeah, it's a barbershop, right?
Barbershop, and maybe
barber that had tested positive.
Right, and maybe they, broke a little bit of a known protocols to go to the barbershop and X, Y, and Z, or maybe made it up. I'd never want to put any words in like that, accuse anybody of that. But he was also saying that, overall, there's a lot of players that didn't want to be there. So they had to kind of take it on the chin. They want, to relax, some family time, let their bodies heal. Then they had to go out there and play in an All-Star game. So he was talking, on both sides. He was talking about a little bit about the players. Obviously, they're, worthy of being there. They've been really, really dominant in the East. And I think Joel Embiid has been, maybe the MVP from start to finish.
Yeah, he's on the short list.
He's on the short list. He's either one or two. And, obviously LeBron's always up there. So it's those two battling. So a little bit of that, because I know LeBron has been kind of screwed over some years and he really wants that MVP. And, LeBron was able to play. They weren't. So that was a little bit of a jab, but then also it was a bigger jab or maybe a haymaker thrown at the Adam Silvers and the guys that are up there deciding it to have an All-Star weekend, considering that the season started so quickly. So, that's just what, part of, LeBron is very, very, thoughtful, but he's very, very smart how he's trying to get his message across or messages across. And he's not afraid to say what other people think or what the majority of people are, meaning, his, obviously whether it's his teammates or everybody else in the NBA wants to get across. So it'll be interesting to see how it goes and how the season ends up as far as who this weekend supposedly affects, but then how they come out of the gates. Considering there wasn't a lot of time off.
Yeah, I thought it's interesting that, to me, coming out of this All-Star weekend and kind of moving through it, the two biggest storylines to me, and this is different kind of than most years, were should they even be playing the game / why are they doing this? And the craziness of All-Star being in Atlanta. And I think that both of those things in a way are kind of linked, because I think that part of why LeBron and a lot of players, honestly, and he was really just one that has enough clout to say it. Almost all of them probably felt it like he did about, they didn't really want to be there. But I think part of that is like you said, hey, the owners have basically said they weren't going to have this. Then you're going to make us do it, but then we're going to have it in Atlanta, in a city that we all love to go to, right? And people are known to go down there and go party, but we can't do it because of everything going on, obviously, with COVID. But then the NBA was trying to crack down on that and try to take away the parties, even though I wonder how successful they were at that, if you were kind of keeping them off the books or whatever. But I just think that those were the two kind of dominant storylines of the weekend. And I thought once they started the skills competition and stuff, it kind of looked lackadaisical at first. That dunk competition was kind of trash. Like, it was fun to see Steph win the 3-point contest, because when he gets going, that's what it looks like, right? And so that was probably the best part about the skill stuff. But then the game was the game. But then you had all of the kind of craziness surrounding it, where you see, people coming down, sleeping in U-Hauls just to be around it. You saw the footage on social media of people partying and acting crazy anyway. So it was just kind of a weird weekend, in probably one of two cities, or maybe three. If it could have been Atlanta, Vegas, maybe New Orleans, would have been kind of the three big ones that, like, I'm sure the players would want to go to, but not under these circumstances.
Yeah, and also with the COVID issues down there with Atlanta, it's not the best place to go down there either.
Yeah, that's true.
And so, yeah, they had protocols for them not to be out there, but then at the same time, there's still exposure down there. And then let's not forget, Atlanta is known for all the people going down there. If you've seen some of the tweets and on Instagram, the stories, they are robbing people left and right. They are stealing. They're known. Atlanta is known, if people out there don't know, they're known for whether it's having, when the Super Bowl's down there, All-Star weekend, or any type of big like party weekend, people that drive somewhat even nice cars, or even anything, they'll just leave your car on blocks and take your rims. That's what Atlanta's known for. So there's a lot that goes into it. It's interesting that it was Atlanta. Maybe they were already, predetermined to do it, but you'd like to think that they would use Atlanta for a city when they really, really could, have an all-star weekend. So, it's one of those things they had to, sometimes, when you are a player, you got to, take it on the chin. They did take it on the chin. And look, the NBA and the NBA's Player Association have a really, really good relationship. This is something that to keep an eye on, because you got to think they had a little bit of a risk of when they were going to start the season, because obviously the NBA wanted them out there as soon as possible. Obviously the Players Association, I think, wanted to even start it in January. So that was the first one. Then we started the season early, and we're going to hit you with the All-Star game. So it's going to be interesting to see when the next big issue comes up, who comes out on top. But yeah, it wasn't look, until everybody's vaccinated or we're back to somewhat normal, which I don't think we'll ever get back to normal. What we had before, it was still going to, it's going to be in people's minds for quite some time. You're going to have to be able to adjust, and it's just, the NBA is just trying to, they're in survival mode. They got to make money back after a year that, they obviously, I'm assuming, lost, a pretty penny. So they're trying to get back, some of the money that they lost, and try to get back to some normalcy. So as the season goes on, it's going to be interesting. If things start to open up a little bit more, how many fans are going to be there, and how it changes scheduling, right? Because, now they may be spreading things out, but do they, get more back-to-back games? What do they change that a little bit? And do they add in the games that were canceled or postponed from, earlier in the season? I think it's been 31 games. So there's a lot of leeway there for the NBA to kind of, get it started. Do they throw out the rule of having 8 guys if everybody's vaccinated? So there's some things that to keep an eye on moving forward, and to see how, one, it affects the players on the court, and then 2, how it affects their relationship with the NBA and the NBA's Players Association.
Oh, there are some, man, there's fascinating kind of, and I don't know if we can say fights, but just discussions that are on the way. And I do think that you hit 2 of the really big ones. The thing about fans, and that won't necessarily be a players association versus the owner situation, but the owners will definitely want that as things do start to open up. And as you see other sports announcing, like baseball, for example, has different, so I think I just saw this headline where Chicago is going to have 20% capacity for baseball, and like different baseball teams have announced different stuff. I think LA County has been kind of going through different tiers, and they're getting getting closer to being able to open things up. So it would not surprise me if you end up with fans at some point by the playoffs to at least generate that revenue and have a normal ish playoff, right? But I think the thing that's coming, and this is something that I think that as people were very excited and still are very excited about vaccinations and that helping to get people closer to normal life, you can start to see it. We've seen little comments from players about, hey, it's a personal choice on whether or not I get vaccinated. Adam Silver is saying, hey, maybe we can figure out a way to get everybody in the NBA vaccinated. Like, I think that that's your next kind of battle between the players, because I don't know, and this has happened in businesses all across America. It's a much bigger discussion than just sports, but just about whether or not you can make people get the vaccine, or like can you just kind of convince them to do it because it would be in the best interest of everybody, and if you can actually make them do it. Like, I think that that's the next thing, because I actually think, speaking of LeBron, I think he said over the weekend that it's a personal choice, it's a personal matter. So we'll kind of see where that one goes.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's apprehension among players. I think they even had a meeting they had independent doctors to come in and explain the vaccination to some of the NBA players, or some teams have done it. And it's something that's going to education is going to be not only for the masses, for everybody, but then also these athletes, their bodies are how they get paid. There's apprehension obviously from African Americans, from obviously the stuff that happened before, even though it was a long time ago, but it's not so long ago that they don't know about it and can't read about it. Right. And there isn't enough, I guess, results from people that have had the vaccination, and then you don't know what to believe. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens, how they go about it, and how, if they can really force the hand of players to do so. And that's going to come down to, it might be a legal battle. It might be a team choice. It might be based on your state and how they govern things, and it might be varied by state by state. Then you could even go a step farther if you want to do conspiracy things. Well, that could affect where you go in free agency, next year, and X, Y, and Z. And maybe one organization is a little bit more lenient and one's not. And so, that's the next big thing. It's going to be interesting. I think the NBA has always been, I would say this, I'd be very surprised if Adam Silver isn't out in front of this. He's very, very thoughtful and at the forefront of doing things for the betterment of the league and the players. I don't think he's going to sit on his hands and not talk to not only the NBA Player Association leadership, but obviously the star players, the LeBron James, the Kevin Durant, the Chris Pauls, the guys that are been through the grind with the NBA, been a part of this generation of really taking it to the next level. But then also those guys are the leadership of the league and the face of the league. So he's gonna take all their their thoughts into it and try to come up with a plan that's for the betterment of the league, obviously, but then also for the players as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And that will just be a really interesting thing, because you're talking about like free agency advantages potentially down the road. But like, it really just for a short term thing, it could really actually be an availability like in the season and in the playoff situation, right? Like, if you can convince your entire team to be vaccinated, it just greatly reduces the chance that any of them would then go miss games, right? And what if you get to the point to where like you're in the first round of the playoffs and the star player on the opposing team has to miss games due to the protocols and contact tracing? Like, well, if he's been vaccinated, that wouldn't have happened, right? So like that sort of stuff can be really interesting. And how it goes with competitive advantages in sports. Like, I think that that's what it will maybe ultimately come down to, but that'll definitely be something to kind of keep an eye on moving forward. Now, shifting gears a little bit, I think maybe for the first time in a very long time, we have a commitment to talk about for the Huskers. It's like back in my wheelhouse. I'm feeling good here.
Let's break that down.
Over the weekend, Nebraska got their first 2022 commitment from Columbus, Nebraska linebacker Ernest Hausman. He's a 3-star out of Columbus High School. He's probably about 6'3", 205, 210. But I wanted to get into something specific with Jay about this, because Ernest has played outside linebacker and wide receiver mostly during his high school career. When I talked to him yesterday for the stories I did on hillvarsity.com with him, he talked about he's been primarily recruited by Barrett Ruud, and that would be his future position coach, obviously, to play inside linebacker. So my specific question for you, Jay, is what if you've had a chance to look at his film or if you've heard about him, what is it that makes a kid project more to inside linebacker versus outside? And how do you get a jump start on starting to play that position at the high school level if you have not yet and you're going to do it in college?
What first thing I look at is I want to see his closing speed, and obviously, playing receiver, and I think he might even play a little corner. He's a really, really good athlete. So, that's right there. He checks the boxes there, so he can come in and out of his breaks. You want to see how he, is able to go from point A to point B with no wasted steps. If you watch his huddle tape, it's pretty apparent that he has that and then some. And then what I mean by that, he has a plenty of room to grow. And then you want to look at body type, right? You might be 6'3", but you have short arms. Are you 6'3" and have long arms? Or, do you have a long torso from waist down or waist up? So you want to look at that type of stuff. And then also you want to see how ultimately for me is how you can use your hands and the type of plays that you make, right? So if you're more of a straight line guy, when you just kind of run in there and blow things up and the quarterback or running back is in your way, and you're more of an outside linebacker guy. When you can make plays in space, which he can, then you can play more of an inside. And for him, learning how to take on blocks and stuff like that, that's going to, in high school, you're never going to be good at it because you're not going to be at the college level because you're not playing against college players, right? So that's something that he's going to learn while he gets into group work and learn from Barrett Ruud and the guys that have been there. But this football instincts and being so young and so new to the game of football, he's a guy that that you can really, it's almost having like a blank canvas and you can just kind of mold him like a thing of clay. And so he doesn't have a ton of bad habits. He doesn't have a ton of bad coaching. I think he's been coached pretty well. The fact that, he plays on both sides of the ball, played receiver. What I'd also like, he's going to be able to diagnose routes as well. So you want somebody when they're talking about, a skinny post or bang 8 or don't, take the cheese on a flat route, he's able to do that. And one thing that I really, really like is that when he's played outside linebacker, he can drop really well. So that helps when he goes into inside linebacker. He's able to cover space. He's not afraid to play in space. So then he brings another dynamic to your team where you get a playmaker athlete or a superior athlete that's able to match up against running backs, a little bit of slot receivers. And then he's big enough or will be big enough to really handle big physical tight ends. He's 6'3", and, you're going to maybe get him up to 225, at the, in the first year or two. He's going to be able to anchor down against tight ends, and he can run. And so, it's just for him, I think, he's a 3-star. I think he's continues to prove. They go to camp, so end up a 4-star. Nebraska got a really big commit because you're actually getting a player and a half. I like to call in recruiting. You get the guy that you recruited, and then you're getting a half another player that he's going to improve by the time he gets on campus. And then you're pretty much playing with house money. You got a 3-star recruit that's actually a 4, and then depending on how he plays, he's going to turn into maybe a 4 or 5. So it's it's a good get for Nebraska in-state guy. I think it's the first one of 2020. You had they got the linebacker up in Omaha, and lineman from Central where they Nebraska going to make their I think top 5 or 8. You get Houseman who's just as good and has maybe a little bit more upside. And listen here, I'm not hating on the young man from Burke because he's not a Nebraska commit. I'm talking about more upside because he hasn't played as much football. He's a bigger kid, bigger frame. And so that's what I mean by upside. So it's a good get for Nebraska. They should be happy. And then hopefully this opens the floodgates to getting some more, moving forward.
Yeah, and one of the things, too, is you talk about kind of Houseman's potential to continue to move up the rankings and, like, his potential to continue to get better at his craft is I've begun really, in the job that I do as recruiting analyst, like really paying a lot of attention to not just the offers that kids get, but are they getting offers from schools that if you're a defender or a linebacker, do they play really good defense? Are they known for developing linebackers? And are you getting offers from schools in the conference? And that's one of the things that really kind of stood out to me about Houseman is that, he basically picked Nebraska over Iowa, Michigan, Northwestern, right? He also had a Minnesota offer and he had a Michigan State offer, right? And so I think it was 6 of the teams in the Big Ten he had offers from, and that's the kind of stuff that I really like. So, like, if Iowa and Michigan, and Northwestern, obviously, too, in the division, who are very good at identifying and developing linebackers. If they were looking at him, and were really seriously looking, and I know they were, I think that's a great sign, because sometimes, man, when you beat out, and it's not 100% across the board, because there are hidden gems out there, but when you're beating out, kind of random schools versus these schools that you beat out for Houseman, I think it should just make you even more excited as a fan, to see what these kids can do.
Well, yeah, I mean, the big school that I saw that that was a big deal was Michigan State. Mel Tucker, is well known. Look, Mel Tucker coming from coach under Nick Saban, X, Y, and Z. Also, coached at Colorado. Got a lot out of Colorado's linebackers and played a lot of freshmen and had them play really, really good, as we saw when Nebraska lost to him. Defensive guy, he played at, or he's coached in the NFL. Look, when he's offering, and they got the Sparty dog mentality up there, and they got the kind of grinders mentality. That's a big offer. Throw in Northwestern. It tells you 2 things. Academically, he's right.
Yep,
but then
absolutely.
Look, when you got Pat Fitzgerald that knows how to look, the head coach knows how to play the position, has built his defense around excellent linebacker play. And knows what to look for that's going to be in the Big Ten. That's a double check. So it's a big get for Nebraska. They should be happy about it, and I'm sure they're ecstatic, and hopefully things open up here. Obviously get more commits. But if you want to start your recruiting class off in 2022, in state or not, I mean, that's a guy that you want, and that's the guy that fits in well, guy that wants to be at Nebraska, which is really, really big. You don't want somebody to say, hey, I didn't have you in my first top 8, but then Nebraska starts winning. Okay, I'll come back in. That's no different than a recruit. You didn't recruit me at the beginning. Now you want me.
Right.
You want
that cuts both ways. Yeah.
It goes both ways. And you want guys that are going to be there. And you can't fault kids. Look, I will tell you this for you people out there. You can't fault Nebraska or kids to want to go to other places. Sometimes there's things that, send kids or make kids want to go to other states that has nothing to do with the coaching staff. That has nothing to do with whether they offered 1, 2, or 3 of your kids. It's just the way that they want to do it, and you can't fault them for it. And also, it's actually a good thing. The more people that come in here that want to look at what's happening in Nebraska, it's a good thing. It gives them more options. But 2, you're gonna have more options to pick from, and you can actually pick and choose. And you're not going to be, let's say, like I call it handicapped. Like, okay, well, this is a kid that we really don't want, doesn't fit in our system, but he's from Nebraska, and we got to take him. And he might not want to be here, but you know what? We got to take him because of the pressure. Now you have 10 choices. Then you can actually take the right choice for a kid that's, I guess, the marriage or relationship is there. He wants to be there. You want him there. Now, would Nebraska like to have every single recruit in 2022? Sure. Woods is going to be good. The kid at Burke's going to be good. Houseman is going to be good. You want to get them. But if they don't want to come, you can't make them come, and you can't feel bad for it, especially if you recruited them and you offered them and you did everything you could to get them to go there. It might just not be their choice. Ultimately, it's up to them to make their choice right, and it's also up to Nebraska to make their choice wrong. And that's the great thing about it.
Yeah, and that's what I think that's an important thing, because as long as Nebraska is making an honest effort at it, and they are, it's not always, and they are in the case of all the kids that we're talking about, like it's fine. Like you're gonna have, it's not fine. Like you don't want that to happen. You don't want those kids to go elsewhere, especially because they're going to go to other like big time schools, and you don't want to see that. But at the same time, if you're Nebraska, you can't like wallow in that, right? And be like, oh man, Deshaun Woods and Devin Jackson didn't have us in their top group. I guess our class is just screwed on March 8th, right? Like, or whatever. Actually, the date was a couple of weeks ago when they actually did that, right? And so you got to keep it pushing. And there's still a path like to Nebraska ending up, with a good recruiting class, because like think about it, even with some of the misses, like say this past recruiting cycle with Keegan Johnson and Avante Dickerson, they were two higher rated kids from the state that didn't come here. Nebraska still ended up with the top 20 class. Like it doesn't mean that the class is doomed by any means, but you want to get them. But there's plenty of time for Nebraska to find other players to be able to fill those roles. And you are right that one of the things that has been kind of, I guess, underrated or overlooked about Nebraska building these recruiting classes is just how much kids want to be here. And so it doesn't matter if you're getting a bunch of 4-stars, but the kid transfers out in the year, right? Like if he's no longer here, it doesn't matter. That's not helping your team at all. So you've got to also just find a way to have kids that want to be here, want to get better, want to help turn it around, and then get it going. But something specifically I also wanted to make sure to mention about Houseman real quick is that one of the things we talked about a bunch so far with him is just his athleticism, being able to play multiple positions in high school on both sides of the ball. To me, to my very untrained eye, but still talking to people about these things, it feels like Nebraska is actively trying to get more athletic at the inside linebacker position, and they want to stop seeing what we've seen over the last couple of years, and not as much last year. It got better last year, but the year before it in particular, where teams seem to be isolated and identifying the inside linebackers to throw on and try to get them in coverage. It feels like they're really trying to address that.
Yeah, I mean, look, they have to, they understand that being more athletic in the inside linebacker position is the way the game's changing, because obviously the tight end position is obviously starting to rule the roost here. But then also being more athletic is actually going to give you more options on defense. It's going to allow you to blitz more, cover more, and you can be even more, I guess, confusing on defense because you're not bringing in guys, off the sidelines, because you're able to keep the same unit on. Then you can open up your blitz package. Obviously, you want to be able to stop the run. And then also it's been a weakness that they've had ever since they've been here, and where it's being more athletic in the inside linebacker position. If you look at just in the Big Ten, right? If you look at Penn State, I think was one of the better defenses, and then you look at Ohio State. If you look at their linebackers and athletic as they are, then compared to where we're at with the guys that are playing, say, when Scott's first or second year, it's night and day, right? And so they just know that they need to improve it, and I think he can do it. And, you don't have to be 245 pounds and stuff like that. You can be 225 and be athletic as long as you're strong and physical and be able to do stuff, but it gives you more options, more speed. The game is a game they're trying to isolate you and play in space, but you also got to be able to come downhill and crack some heads. So, like I said, I keep saying it's a good get. It's good for a fan. You need to be excited that Nebraska is going out there and making adjustments. You get what I'm saying? They're not just recruiting the same guy. We talked about it, maybe at the very beginning we started doing this podcast, how they changed up the type of receivers that they're recruiting as far as
on the fly quickly.
Right? They knew right away we can't have these like little water bugs in here and think we're going to survive. So you need some guys, 6 feet and above that are able to, get downfield, be physical, being able to block and stuff like that. Because it's a big boy football. It's no different at the linebacker position. And you got to be athletes that are out there. And you might have to develop them. You might have to get a guy that's 200 pounds, 205, get him in the weight room, make sure he still stays flexible and explosive and improve even on his speed and quickness that he had before, all while putting good weight on him. And that's just the way it's got to be. Nebraska's not getting the Alabama guys that they're coming out there and they're already what I mentioned before, ready to go. So you gotta find a different way to, peel the orange or, skin a cat or whatever the analogy you want to use.
Yeah, for real. And I do think that is worth noting that they have definitely adjusted on the fly, and they are trying to get the thing going. You just have to see. The plan makes sense. They just have to execute it, right?
Yeah, it does. I mean, look, every year, this is the way it goes. You're forecasting who's going to have a good year, who you want to step up, what guys that are coming in that you expect them to play, where he projects, at this next level, which is college. Will he be ready to play? How soon will he be ready to play? Yes, you got to hit on recruits, but part of like having a good recruiting class, you don't know what you have until you're in like year 3 or 4, right? And so, and part of having a good recruiting class in year 3 or 4 is getting guys that want to be there and want to actually improve on their football skills and
So
actually want
stick it out to get there.
stick it out. One thing, here's the thing with kids now. They like getting recruited more than they like getting coached. That's the thing. That's the thing about the transfer portal that's so dangerous, right? Oh, I got recruited. Coach showed me love, this, and this. I get here and I actually have to work. I got to be up on time. I got to be there to work out. And there's actually guys that are just as good as me. And actually a lot of them are bigger, faster, and stronger, right, than I am right now. And I actually got to, work for my position. Okay, I'll jump in the transfer portal and have some, lower level college recruit me at the same time. And then you got to do the same thing when you're there. So yes, the ability to stick it out is going to be, won't be such a big problem when you have guys that want to be there, right? This is something that they want to do. Whether you say, hey, you want to be ready to be a part of the Big Red turnaround, do you want to be part of, the group that, started the winning tradition, X, Y, and Z, I would just say, do you want to go and take advantage of a huge opportunity that could, in a lot of ways, set you up for the rest of your life? Not just going to the NFL, right? You could have a big impact at the University of Nebraska in your 4 or 5 years and not step foot on the NFL field, because you could cement yourself in the university of being a good player, part of something that's obviously bigger than you, and then to have the ability to come back, either work at the university or get a job in the state of Nebraska. That's really what you're looking at, and you have to see beyond, year one, practice one, first month. You got to see 2 or 3 years down the road, and you got to see somebody that you can compare yourself to, or actually that you want to beat out to get to the point that I just mentioned before.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that wise words that we get, I wrote something about that on the site last week, is that you have to be able to understand, that when you enter that portal, it's not necessarily going to be like it was when you got recruited. You are almost always going to have lower level schools than what you were being recruited at out of high school coming after you. And in a lot of cases, if you had been a little mentally tougher to stick it out, not in all cases, but a lot, things would have worked out for you, and you would have learned a valuable lesson as well. Now, every week we end the show with a segment called Put Them on Blast, where we basically put somebody on blast for something that they did or said.
Put them on blast.
This week, I'm going with somebody that I think surprisingly we might not have used before. I know I haven't, and I'm actually surprised that we've gone this far into the show without, and that's Stephen A. Smith. I'm going to put him on blast for saying that Dame Lillard needed to leave Portland to be appreciated, all while he is the man at ESPN, and he's ignoring what Dame Lillard did in the All-Star game last night. If for some reason you missed it, Dame Lillard last night had 32 points and made 8 threes in the All-Star game last night, including essentially a half-court shot to end the game, which is really cool. You had Steph Curry coming out on the court doing Dame's wave goodbye that he did to Oklahoma City. Sorry, Derek Peterson, noted Oklahoma City fan, my colleague over at Hale Varsity. But I find it interesting for 2 reasons. One, I like Dame Lillard a lot. I've always secretly hoped that he could be on the Lakers, and that would be great. But I also think it's very cool that he's tried to stick it out with Portland and just make them better. Even year after year, people pick against Portland making the playoffs, it feels like, and every year they make it. Every year they're pretty dangerous. They had that really good run a couple of years ago. But they just haven't been able to get over that hump. And I wish for him that they could find a way to do that. I don't know if he needs to leave necessarily, but I also think that a person that really helps to control that narrative, Stephen A. being one of ESPN's top employees, could just do more to promote Dame Lillard, who we all see as one of the greats in the game right now.
Yeah, Stephen A. is very funny how he uses his platform, right? He'll use it for when he was all in on Kawhi and Paul George, and then LeBron's getting taken over. Then he moved to KD coming back. Dame Lillard has been putting in work in a small market in Portland, doing some things that nobody ever thought that he could do with that type of team and organization up there. And the best that he came up with is that he has to leave. Where would he go? I guess you've heard rumors maybe the Lakers, but ultimately he should use his platform, his leadership, and his name to really shed light on the things that he's doing. He's doing it harder than anybody else. Yes, you got, CJ McCollum, but he's not, a Klay Thompson. He's not really a Draymond in his, Draymond's role. He's not a Anthony Davis. He's not a Kyrie. And then, obviously James Harden, as far as what KD has. He's literally doing it with a really, really good player as his co-partner, but not a superstar. And you know what type, if you know and read about Damian Lillard, he's very loyal. And so to suggest that actually comes back to you as you're doing like easy, that's the easy option, right? That's like somebody says, oh, I'm going to, quit and maybe try to go to a better team and like kind of like a James Harden, I'm not going to stick it out. Or Damian Lillard really thinks that he can make a big run in Portland and do some great things up there. So Stephen A, he is the biggest voice in sports media, especially when it comes to the NBA. He should have had a better solution than that, and should have gave Damian Lillard a little bit more respect, because he's a guy that's true and true, and he's from the town in Oakland, and he's not gonna just sell Portland out just like that and take the easy route out, which really Stephen A dogged LeBron for it. Then kind of gave KD, well, he got on KD a little bit, gave him a pass, and then really didn't hit James Harden and all these, and he didn't hit Kawhi Leonard up as hard as he hit LeBron and KD. Now he's suggesting that somebody do it, but when he's actually suggested that these stars shouldn't do it up until this point. So it's kind of, I call it playing tennis, double talking, and you're never right and you're never wrong. So you're right for putting him on blast. And so now, I was going to just double down on basketball and put Blake Griffin on blast because he's joined the Lakers. And, for a guy that wants to come off the bench and hang out with DeAndre Jordan, it's kind of a weak move, but I can see it going with the Nets. And obviously with the Lakers injury situation, I can understand that. But I'm not going to put him on blast. So since I let you, cover, the basketball, well, I'm going to go over to the UFC. And this guy's been popping off to John Jones, who is probably the GOAT of UFC fighting. He's the best of all time. He's kind of on a little hiatus, kind of just chilling. Is Israel Adesanya, who's always been chirping at John Jones, thought he was just going to have a cakewalk in his championship fight, moving up to middleweight, didn't put enough weight on, right? Stayed around 190, 185, fighting a bigger guy that weighed in at 205. His fighting weight was 220. And if you saw it, I just saw the highlights, but he just got suffocated and destroyed. And now the fight's off, right? So you've been chirping for 2 or 3 years. You want John Jones, you're the greatest of all time. You want to beat him. And then you couldn't beat the guy that you were the odds on favorite. I think you were plus 300 or 400 to beat him. Of course, Vegas, and you're trying to fight the greatest of all time. And obviously John Jones says, I'm imagining that super fight is off the table. No more distractions. And so, John Jones is the ultimate troller. But then when you talk so much and disrespect John Jones, and disrespect how he's obviously built up the sport for him to be successful, now you come back and you lay an egg. Now you don't even get your dream match against John Jones. And so I'm putting him on blast, because you never, ever count your chickens before they hatch. You never take an opponent lightly. And, he took obviously his opponent lightly, and he lost the middleweight belt, and he lost a lot of respect from John Jones and a little bit in the UFC ranking. So I'm putting him definitely on blast.
Especially, you never take opponents lightly, especially in that sport of all sports, because you just never know, man. Like, those dudes are pro fighters too. Like, you just never know what's going to happen, which had always been kind of my favorite thing about the UFC. Like, there's like really dominant people like John Jones has been, like Amanda Nunes is, who won again over the weekend, and others. But like, still, even in those runs of dominance, like, you just never know. That one punch that lands just right, or that one kick, or you slip up and you get caught in that chokehold, and it's all over for you. So that's why I'm even more surprised that somebody would do that in that sport.
Yeah, you can get caught slipping, and you could be 19-0 and fighting a guy that's 16-2 or 14-4, and he might have been fighting better opponents, or he just went back to the lab and got a new coach, or it's just not your night and you get caught slipping. And when you get caught slipping, you get put to sleep. And that's what he did. He couldn't handle the bigger man, and he got manhandled. And John Jones is a big dude that has to work extremely hard to make weight. So I think it probably cemented that he's not going to get a title shot. But it's just, I had to put him on blast because he wanted it, and he couldn't get through that last test before you get to the to meet your maker. And when you chirp and you cross the line of just promoting yourself, sometimes it comes back to bite you. Those sports guys are no joke.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? That's a good spot to leave it for today. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast everywhere that you listen to them. Rate us and leave us a 5-star review. If you leave 4, I am inclined to think that you are a hater. Make sure that you are checking out the other podcasts on the Hail Varsity Network, the Mind Your Own podcast, Varsity Club, More to It, and the Hail Varsity Radio Show. You can also check out the Hail Varsity YouTube page where I did a video again this morning, kind of the recruiting question of the week. And you can email the show at straightupbreakdown@hailvarsity.com, or you can find us on Twitter at Greg Smith HB and at Foreman5644. We will catch you next time.
A Hurrdat Media Production.